Now, you've already heard this because we talked about this off air last week. And I talked to you about this several months ago. One of the things I liked most about the early MGB podcasts was Podcast of the Week.
Yeah.
And the last one I think I did was before we left in England in June 2018. Because I know we recorded like 3 before we left. So I think episode 20 was probably the last one. Now, in September, I wanted to do something about this. But Mason's podcast, we agreed we weren't going to do that anymore. We were going to cut out the little segments. Thought about doing a third podcast. Now, I did think of all the great podcasts I'd listened to within their first 10 episodes. Blade Job Show, Two-Faced Pod, Is It Over Yet? Take the Bump. All of those are staples for me, and I caught them fairly early on. Now, if you hadn't been so rude and let me carry on, then you're going to regret that now. Also, Matt Attack and the Power Bomb Girls, but being from my own network, that's a little different. So you feel embarrassed now, right? So no. I hadn't forgotten you at all, because I know what your cough was in reference to. So I started searching on Twitter for wrestling podcasts plus episode 1 to try and find some new podcasts to listen to. And I decided I was going to give everything 3 listens. First podcast is always tough because you don't really know what you're doing and you just experimenting. But I thought by the third podcast, you've sort of got a bit of an identity. You know what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And it fitted with the name of the podcast that I want to do called Third Time's a Charm Pod. It's at 3RD Pod. And I also liked it because it's going to be my third podcast as well, if I get around to doing this. Each additional podcast that you do, you learn from your others. And that's hopefully what's happening with this third episode too. So when I started with MGB, that was brand new. When I did Good Cop, Bad Cop with you, I had a little bit more idea of how I wanted to organize things, how I wanted to promote, etc., etc. Now I'm doing this one nearly a year later. I have even more clearly scripted ideas of what I want to do and how I want to run this. Now, the description on Twitter, which I haven't done anything with this Twitter feed for 4 months, says that at Third Pod says, quote, apparently everyone has their own wrestling podcast. So I review the third episode of new wrestling podcasts. I want to find out that next big podcast first. Now, I thought about that, and then I actually changed what I wanted to do. I was going to listen to the first 3. Then I decided I was going to listen to the third one. And then actually, I've just changed the whole thing again. I'm just going to listen to 3 in a row, whichever I got round to. There was also plenty of good podcasts I came across, but I didn't catch them until much later. One particular I can think of, I didn't listen to until episode 30. Now, I still want to talk about these 2. So actually, this will now be about any podcast that I listen to after I've had 3 listens to and I still like it. I do want to get the message out for those new podcasts, so I think others who like MGB and Good Cop, Bad Cop would also like as well. And I also feel very fortunate that the people gave Mason a chance with his podcast, liked his posts, retweeted, and before we even talk about that, giving him a voice, the Visionaries Wrestling Network gave him a chance to put his message out for other people. Now, MGB is actually approaching its 1-year anniversary. I think by the time this comes out, it'll be 11 months. So I've got to start to accept that I'm actually a somewhat established podcaster now. Now, I don't overestimate my impact, though, but any push I can give to podcasts that deserves more recognition is great. In some ways, this is less about wrestling, and it's more about describing what podcasts are and getting their message out. So it is going to be very different from our other 2 podcasts that I do. Now, for this one, I'm only going to follow podcasts who I feature, so people can follow them easier. So if you look at my followers, these are basically the podcasts that I like and I think you should go look at as well. So I'm not following anyone back who follows me. I'm not expecting many followers, but that's fine. But I do know the people who do follow will actually be true fans. Now, with having snow days this week, we got about 8 inches of snow last night. I am going to try and do the first episode this week. The overall podcast is not going to be weekly, but when I have something to share, I'm going to put it out there. So if this does interest anyone, follow the podcast at 3RD Pod. I've got one more thing to talk about, and I'll do this one quickly. Now,